All right, greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller. I'll be joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. We got the top 16 reveal coming up on Saturday. We will be doing the mock committee top 16 tomorrow, Thursday night. Best way to predict what a committee is going to do with a committee. Always have a good time chatting with Rocco and Dave and Shelby, and I guess we got a newcomer this year, Mr. Made for March. I'll have to figure out what his actual name is. I'll just call him Made all night long. I don't know, but so we're just going to go through the current state of the top 16 as we kind of see it. Maybe our opinions will change tomorrow. Maybe our opinions will change in 2 minutes as St. John's is almost about to lose to Villanova. We'll see what happens there. But Graham, how are you feeling about your 16 heading into, first of all, heading into tomorrow's discussion and then heading into Saturday?
Yeah, I think I feel really good about the one line and the two line and really the order there. I wouldn't be surprised if there's slight alterations, but I feel like I've got a good handle on those lines. And I think the beginning of the three line, I feel pretty confident in as well. It's when you get like halfway through the three line that it starts to get really murky and very hard to differentiate teams. There's things you start really liking about teams. There's things you start really disliking about teams. And so I think for me, it's a confidence that I probably have most of the right 16, if not all 16. But the order, especially from once you get to that like 11 spot through 16, is really difficult to parse through.
Yeah, I think 11 is where we'll mostly start really debating things here. I remembered I haven't taken a shot in a while. And then after that, you got to show off your shirt that you're wearing from the mock committee. Oh, off the ceiling again. Why do I always hit the ceiling, man? I got to get my line drive down. But you're wearing a shirt from last year. We're going to be doing
Banner brackets. Here we go.
banner brackets mock committee. Uh, we're doing it all virtually this year. I think March 6th through 8th or something like that, the week before Selection Sunday. But it's going to be fun, and tomorrow night will be too. But let's get into the seating situation. Share screen. Blah, 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 blah. I'm just going to pull up current Bartorvik stuff. There we go. I think outside of the net top 25, Memphis is the only one even remotely worth mentioning. So I don't think we need to venture too far beyond that. Just occasionally, I'll filter by resume average to get Memphis back in the conversation. But Auburn, indisputable number one overall. Alabama, pretty indisputable number two overall. That could change on Saturday, but for Saturday morning for the reveal, no way it's going to be anything other than that, right? For the top two spots.
Yeah, I agree. I think when you look at Alabama, what's so impressive to me is all their quad one wins are away from home. That is really standing out on the resume. So I feel very good about Auburn and Alabama at number one, number two overall.
All right, and then number three overall, it's probably still Duke. I think Florida is close. I think the fact that Florida didn't really play much of a non-conference schedule could be their downfall there for maybe for even getting to the one line at all. I wouldn't be shocked if Tennessee is still there over Florida, even in spite of what we've seen the last couple of days. But probably Duke three, probably Florida four. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Florida, when you combine their efficiency and that win at Auburn now, I think it's just enough to get there. But yeah, I think it's still very close between Florida and Tennessee. Let's not remember or forget that, yeah, Florida beat Tennessee very badly, but Tennessee also beat Florida very badly. So
Right.
there is some reason to believe Tennessee could still be there.
Yeah, I think if in theory, recency bias shouldn't matter at all. As far as it matters, like Florida beat out one at Auburn 2 months ago, right? It shouldn't make that much of a difference if you can forget what happened in the last like 4 days. And Tennessee's loss at Kentucky, not bad by any stretch of the imagination. Kentucky's going to come up pretty soon in this conversation. And Tennessee, you can see here, 8-5 against quad one, 4-4 quad 1A. Like Florida just didn't do much of anything out of conference, which I have on a different spreadsheet here, but they had a 248th non-conference strength of schedule rank. So I think that could be similar to Iowa State last year, where that really ends up being their downfall. But I mean, if ever you were going to have a bad non-conference strength of schedule, like doing it in this year's SEC is the time to do it. Like anybody can make up for that. What's your two line right now? I assume we have the same four teams. We might even have the same in order. Obviously, we did not discuss this beforehand.
I have Tennessee, as we mentioned, still a potential one seed. Another team that I wouldn't be shocked if they were a one seed is Houston. They're sixth overall for me, and then I followed up with Texas A&M, Purdue. I already had Texas A&M above Purdue even prior to Purdue losing to Michigan because of that neutral site win, neutral site in Indy. But besides that, I think I feel really pretty good about those teams. I think Purdue maybe is the best chance of not being a two seed. But if you look at it, they still have 14 wins against quads one and two. They have really good efficiency, good resume metrics. There's just not a lot of holes to poke in Purdue's resume. So I think they're going to hang on to that two seed.
Yeah, I thought if they had won at Michigan, they maybe had a case for that fourth number one seed once Tennessee lost as well. But yeah, I have the same five, six, seven, eight. But no, I say I have the same Tennessee, Houston, Texas A&M, Purdue. So yeah, not really much debate there. I think those are very solidly the ones and the twos. Like you said, like even losing to Michigan, that's not a painful loss, but I think they had that much of a cushion, what the hell? Cushion over the top three seed, which was for me Arizona, and then Arizona lost to Kansas State, which made that divide even more so. Right now, my top three, and this is where it starts to get interesting because you can go any number of directions. I have Iowa State as my top three. I think there's a case for Kentucky there. Where are you at this point?
Iowa State is my top three seed, and I think there's a case for Kentucky there. So we are exactly in order and really along the same lines. Kentucky, you look at their really everything, right? You look at their resume metrics, their efficiency metrics. Nothing says three seed, except you look at who they beat, and they've just
Yeah.
beaten really, really good teams at a higher clip than could possibly be coincidental. I think the committee is going to look at that and decide Kentucky has to be a three seed or potentially even better. Would I be shocked if they got a two seed? No, I wouldn't.
I wish when you hovered over this on Torvik, like, the wins were green and the losses were red. Like, I remember they lost at Clemson, obviously, but trying to remember just offhand I know they swept Tennessee. But yeah, nothing, not a single one of those losses would be bad from those 11. So yeah, the real question with Kentucky is right there, the 8-7, right? They're 0-1 against quad two, and that's kind of an oddity. Wasn't Duke like that last year too? They only played like one or two quad two games, and that ended up weighing them down a little bit in our discussion heading into the top 16 reveal. But I don't think that's going to really matter, right? I mean, Kentucky, if you're 8-6 against quad one, who cares if you're 8-7 against quads one and two? So I think,
I mean, I think you could potentially say it helps Kentucky because now all the focus is on everything they've done against the top of the bracket, and there's not really a whole lot to pick at.
yeah, resume metric average right there at 11.7, so that kind of screams three seed. Yeah, I think they're even before the win over Tennessee, I think there was a case for them as a three. Now there's maybe a case for them jumping Purdue for that top or last two seed, but I think right in the middle of the three line is where they'll end up. I tried to vamp as long as I could to see what happens with St. John's because I had St. John's at 11. They're down two with 40 seconds left. I think if they lose this game, they probably still hang on to a spot in the top 16. Maybe now we get into a discussion of do the Wednesday games matter for the selection committee? Because they were the debate started yesterday, right? Or was it this morning? I forget when Warlock tweeted about they were getting together, but I know usually they are done by now. And we were saying last year, the year before that, that certainly the Friday games don't matter. Generally, the Thursday games don't matter. It seemed like the Wednesday games didn't even matter. And then last year we had the San Diego State one. What was it, at New Mexico? And then they gave us we're moving San Diego State up right there in our faces. But do you think St. John stays a top 16 no matter what?
I think St. John's is going to be a top 16 no matter what. And I think it's very similar to Florida. The resume metrics are starting to come together, but there's the simple you have a terrific overall record in a tough conference. So, Florida obviously playing out of the SEC, very different than St. John's. But I think the one thing that could really help with St. John's if they lose this game and will help them regardless. Right now, all of their losses are by 5 points total in all of their losses combined. If they lose this game by two and they're looking at four losses by 7 points combined, you have to feel that the committee's going to have some grace there, even if the efficiency metrics aren't really elite.
Yeah, and I mean, we could get into that discussion a little bit about how much the efficiency metrics matter at all, really. I mean, maybe this is a good time to scroll down and introduce Memphis to the conversation here with the, I mean, I don't think Memphis is going to be a 3 seed, but if we're going to talk not worrying about efficiency metrics, now's the time to bring up Memphis because resume average 13, but predictives 45 in the net, 45 the predictive average pretty much. But they got 10 games, 10 wins over quads 1 and 2. Only the one particularly bad loss, and even that wasn't bad at home to Arkansas State, uh, which kind of almost sort of becoming a bubble team at this point, question mark. But yeah, I think if the resume metrics say you're a top 10 team and the predictive metrics don't agree, like I mean, we saw it with Providence in 2022. We saw it with Wisconsin that year. I think that the predictives they make us wonder whether they'll stay that good. It doesn't keep them from getting their deserved seed. So I think if St. John's, so they're up by 1, they just got the ball. Oh, nope, nope, down 2. Now they have the ball back. This is fun, live audience. But um, yeah, I think if they win this game, I think they're definitely a 3 seed. If they lose, I still think they're a 4.
Yeah, I think they would hang on to a four. Where I think in the resume versus efficiency side, I do think both play a part. I do think resume is much more important, but it's not just numbers though, right? Like we already talked about this with Kentucky. If you even look at their quad numbers aren't great by themselves. It's what we know behind those numbers. The teams that they played and beat are really, really good, and they deserve some recognition for that. I think Memphis is in a similar boat, especially as you see teams like UConn start to rise yet again. That win looks a little bit better. Winning at Clemson looks a lot better than it did a couple weeks ago. So I think Memphis's resume is continuing to improve. But for me, it's not just the efficiency metrics and kind of how they look a lot. But as you mentioned it, they do have a couple of losses that make you question, maybe these efficiency metrics aren't just bad. Maybe there's a couple results that go along with them as well. So I think Memphis is going to get discussion for a top 16 seed, but ultimately I think it's going to be a team like St. John's that ends up there instead.
Yeah, I think Memphis is just the king of beating quad 3 and quad 4 teams by 4 or 5 points, and it's good, get you in, get you a decent seed. Probably won't be top 16. I have them at 16, like they are my last one, and it's almost by default. Like I just don't like anybody else there. But
Well, I
who's
think
your
one
who's
thing,
your last three?
my last three, so we also didn't talk about my 11 overall either, which is Texas Tech. Really hard team to see.
Oh, yeah.
I like their efficiency, but I love that they pair it with a 6-3 record against Quad One, a road win over Houston, and they've been really good on the road in general in Big 12 play. That is very difficult to do. I think the selection committee is going to have a lot of respect for that. So I think there's a really good argument that Texas Tech should be a 4 or 5 seed, but I kind of like them at the back end of the 3 line just because I think the team and the results kind of go together there.
I was struggling earlier with I actually have Texas Tech at 13. They'll definitely be in the top 16, but I think between their resume average is around 19, and their non-conference schedule, they did nothing, right? Both Texas Tech and Arizona. Like it's tough having either of them on the 3 line, but it's also tough to put anybody else above them because of how good they've been for the last month or so. But man, we were talking about this on Super Bowl Sunday. Between Houston, Arizona, and Texas Tech, like on New Year's Eve, the best win between them was what? Like they did nothing for the first 7 weeks of the season. And I think we saw with Iowa State last year, like at some point, if you just don't do anything, it's going to come back to bite you. At least Arizona played teams though, right? They're like 30th in non-conference schedule. Texas Tech didn't even try. And I think that the committee will keep them out of the top three seeds because of that. But again, I could be completely wrong. But I think Michigan might actually be ahead of Texas Tech at this point. Very similar resumes. Michigan actually kind of challenged itself out of conference play, better resume metrics, and with that win over Purdue last night, I think that may have pushed them over. But we're getting convoluted here. Let's just do three seeds right now. So we had Iowa State and Kentucky. We agreed on that. I right now, I no longer have St. John's. They lost. They were my 11. But I had Arizona at 12, Texas Tech at 13. So I guess I do now have Arizona and Texas Tech both as threes.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously Texas Tech I mentioned. This 12th pick was really hard, and I ended up going with Kansas, even though I really hate their road record and I hate the way that they've performed against Quad One. You can just see it right there. They're 5-6 against Quad One. But then I look at the kind of combinations, and that's where in a lot of seeding, that's how I start making my differentiators. Is what kind of combos can a team provide? And Texas Tech, that was their combo, right? They're 6-3 against Quad One. They're good on the road. They've got that killer win over Houston on the road, and they have great efficiency. That's a combo. That's a story
Yeah.
that you can tell if you're a committee member. You can convince yourself this team's worthy. And where I think Kansas's combo comes in isn't for the road wins or the Quad One record. I think those are real problems and are very good argument they should be a 4 seed because of it. But then I look at the win over Duke on a neutral court. I look over at the win over Michigan State on a neutral court. And then they combine that with a very convincing home win over Iowa State. So they pack some top end wins. And then you look at their efficiency, and their efficiency tells you this is probably about that 10th best team in the country or so. And then they add that with 12 in KPI. So now there's a resume metric that says, hey, not only do they have the great wins, they also have a resume metric right in this area, and their efficiency tells you they're right in this area. So I think Kansas is right on that like 12 to 14 range. I think 12 is probably as high as they could go. But for me, I was going to pass them with St. John's if St. John's won. But since they didn't, I think Kansas kind of holds on to that final 3 seed.
Yeah, I have Kansas at 14. I mean, they're right there. And I agree with everything you said. And I don't think you mentioned their overall strength of schedule is like 12th or something, one of the better ones in the country. Which that plays out in the quad records. What 5-6 quad one, 10-7 quads one and two. I mean, they've played as many quad one and two games as Auburn, as anybody in the SEC has, even though the Big 12 is not anywhere near as loaded as the SEC. I think that speaks volumes to what they did, and that's what Kansas always does, right? They're a 4 seed every single year because they always go out of their way to schedule. Usually they're really good in the Big 12. This year they already have 5 losses, and that's why they're kind of a questionable 3 or 4 seed right now. But yeah, they're going to be top 16. It's just a question of where. I feel that way about Michigan as well. I think I already had them at 15, and then they beat Purdue, so now they're 13 for me after St. John's loss. Trying to do numbers on the fly here. And
Kansas
I'm not
and
going to over penalize St. John's, but
I think Kansas, Auburn, and Alabama all struck me for one thing in particular. All three of them have played more games against Quad 1A than they have against Quads 3 and 4 combined.
hmm,
That's tough. I mean, those are killer schedules. So obviously, Auburn and Alabama have been a lot more successful against those schedules than Kansas has.
yeah,
So obviously, it's a big difference. But those are really tough schedules if you're playing more Quad 1A than 3 and 4 combined.
yeah, yeah. I think that, especially talking, I could see that. I could see Kansas landing ahead of Texas Tech for that reason, like just that strength of schedule. And Texas Tech, it feels like they have an inflated record because they just didn't do anything for 2 months. Can't can't really fault Kansas for taking a loss against Missouri when and at Creighton, which was like a wounded animal at that point in the season. And Lord knows nobody walks into the Shy Health Center and comes away with a win very often. If they do, they get to, point out how many rings they have to bald fans in the stands. But yeah, I think Kansas could be a three, even though I have them as my second four right now. What's the rest of your? Who else do you have? Like, what do you have all on the four line?
I have St. John's there, and I think I'm probably going to keep them in the same spot. I might drop them a little bit. I'll have to think about it, but I think they're going to stay a 4 seed. And then I follow that up with going to Arizona, who I had as one of my top 3 seeds. Losing at Kansas State's not bad, but it starts to take a little bit of the shine off the resume. If you look at Arizona, their best win away from home is BYU. Very tough to go into Provo and win. But if that's your best win away from home, I think there's a little bit of a question there about how really truly deep that resume is. So, obviously beating Texas Tech and Iowa State at home, great. They were very lucky to beat Iowa State. If Caleb Love doesn't hit that shot,
Yeah.
what are we talking about with Arizona's resume? I think that's a legitimate discussion that could come up in the committee room. Like, if he doesn't hit this heave, what are we really looking at here? So I think Arizona worthy 4 seed, but I don't think they should be on the 3 line right at this moment. And then I get down to Michigan moving up for me to 15 overall and Wisconsin rounding it out at 16 overall. Really love the way Michigan's resume looks as you look at those resume metrics. Very, very good at 10.3 overall. And they're 6-3 against quad 1, 3-1 against quad 1A. Really impressive quad splits. But again, it comes down for me when I look at Michigan and I'm looking for what is that standout win? To me, that's something that really matters. It's like, what's that huge win you can point to? And with Michigan, it's actually kind of the opposite. I think of them as being a neutral court loss that ended up being a good win for other teams. That was their non-conference resume for teams like Wake
Yeah.
Forest and Arkansas. So for me, I think
Oklahoma.
Michigan deserves to be a 4 seed. I'm not sure I'm there quite yet at a 3 seed just because of kind of some of those more questionable losses on neutral courts.
Yeah. I really am not comfortable with Arizona as a 3 seed, even though I have them there. I might scrub them down a little bit because they are not top 16 in any of the resume metrics. Like that's not good. And we know from previous years doing the top 16 mock and paying attention to what the actual results are that like this ends up being like the most important. Like your resume average, it's usually at least of the 16 teams that make the cut, it's 14 of the top 16 in resume metric average, and Arizona's down here at 20th. And I think that could be the highest seeded team that most of us expect to be on there that could get left off. I wouldn't be shocked if they end up being the first team out. But that would mean putting, who in there? A Memphis, Marquette, keeping a Michigan State up there in spite of their recent struggles. So I think Arizona ultimately makes the cut, but I am a little concerned about their overall resume in light of that loss to Kansas State that really dropped them down a bit. I have the same. I just have Memphis as my 16 and Wisconsin at 17. That's just me on principle, not buying Wisconsin after discussions that you and I have had in the past. Like I find it offensive that Wisconsin's resume average is better than Kentucky's when they're 1-4 against quad 1A. Like I don't know what they did to, is it just that 6-0 quad 2 record? Like how are they just top 10 in resume metric average when they really don't have outside of a home win over Arizona anything particularly marquee on their resume?
Yeah, and I'm with you there. They have 2 wins versus the net top 45. And that's pretty good if you're a bubble team trying to get in the tournament. It's
Yeah,
not
right.
good if you're trying to get a protected seed. So I think when you look at Wisconsin's overall quality with their efficiency, it matches up pretty well with the resume metrics. But I think you kind of downgrade them a little bit just because they haven't pieced it together when they've had the opportunity. I think losing at home to Michigan for me was a differentiator when I was deciding who should be above the other one. I think Wisconsin has kind of had an inflated quad 1 record the whole year. Like you see 6-5 and you think pretty good. Then you look at who those wins are against and you realize
I'll pull them
they
up.
probably shouldn't have that good of a quad one record. I think if there's a little bit deeper dive into Wisconsin, the selection committee might view them kind of like they're going to view SMU when they get to the bubble, which is a team that wins all the games they should win and usually does it pretty impressively. But when they play up to tougher competition, they usually fall flat on their face.
Yeah. So they're quad one wins at home against Ohio State. That's quad one. At USC, I believe. Yeah, that's definitely quad one. At Northwestern, I think that's still quad one. At Iowa, borderline quad one. Like aside from Ohio State, who right now I have as my I think second to last team in, none of those are in the field. Like they're getting those quad one wins that are also helping Rutgers kind of stay in the conversation, like beating Northwestern and USC and teams like that. Like, yeah, I'll be curious. Wisconsin versus Kentucky is maybe the biggest thing I'm curious to see from the ultimate top 16 on Saturday. Because if Wisconsin is ahead of Kentucky, like that tells us that they're not really digging into the quality of wins as much as they're just looking at the numbers.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like if they go at Wisconsin from a numerical standpoint, they're probably looking at a 3 seed or at worst a very high 4 seed. I think this is a good litmus test for both of those teams and really the bracket at large. How important is the name on the jersey of the team that you beat? Because if you look at it for Wisconsin, just not a whole lot of meat on the bone there. And again, we're talking about like where do these teams rank amongst the top 4 seed lines or top 5 seed lines, right?
Right.
These are all terrific resumes. Like now we're really picking nits at this point.
And we will really be picking nits tomorrow night during the mock committee. And how long do we usually go for the top 16? I feel like Tim's always like, we'll do it in like 90 minutes, and then it goes 3.5 hours or something. But it'll all
Hopefully
be
we vote quicker
live on
this year.
YouTube. What's that?
Hopefully we vote quicker this year. We'll see
Oh
how
my
that
God.
goes.
Somebody needs to just be in charge of making sure that Rocco is texting while he's talking. That's always our holdup. Who not on your list do you think could be a surprise inclusion? So don't say Memphis because I have them. I won't say Wisconsin because you have them. So outside of our consensus top 17, who do you think could shock us?
Well, the team that I thought could have gotten there was
UCLA.
UCLA if they won
Yeah.
yesterday. I thought UCLA was going to get there. I do think this is not my pick, by the way, so I'm going to give you my pick after this, but don't count out UConn, as weird as it is to say that. I wouldn't be shocked if the committee said, hey, they're going for a three-peat. Did you see that shiny 4-0 record in Quad 1A? I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if UConn was there. I don't think they will be. The team that I think could get there is Marquette. If
Yeah.
you look at the Quad 1 record for Marquette, you see that they're 5-3 against Quad 1. They're 11-6 against Quads 1 and 2. No losses outside of the top 2 quads. So it's all just kind of pretty there. A couple wins in Quad 1A and then just solid numbers across the board. 14-15 in strength of record and wins above bubble. So Marquette for me is a team that I think should be a 5 seed, but I wouldn't be at all surprised if they're amongst the top 16.
Yeah, I basically have Marquette and Wisconsin neck and neck. I guess I actually do have Marquette 17 and Wisconsin 18 because of that head-to-head result earlier this season. Um, I wouldn't be surprised by either of them. One team that could get there that it would surprise me, but it also wouldn't surprise me is Ole Miss. I don't think they're deserving of it, but resume-wise, right, they're kind of the anti-Arizona, where they are top 16, two of the three right outside of it, and the other. They're here 15th overall in resume metrics average. Not a single loss outside of quad one. Just a lot of good to point to. Not a lot of great on their resume, right? I mean, I feel like if you're in the SEC, you gotta have at least two or three really, really good wins, or the committee's gonna find faults in your resume because you had so many freaking chances. And I think we might eventually get to that point with Ole Miss. I have them at 20 overall right now, but if they're 16, I wouldn't cry foul. I don't even know if we'll discuss them tomorrow night, though, really, because I think they might be that far gone.
Yeah, interested to see how it works out. I can see them there as well. But for me, I feel pretty good about my 16. Just because there's not a whole lot of question marks for most of them, right? Like they all kind of fit neatly in a bubble. You get the teams like Texas Tech that are maybe a bit of a wild card with the non-conference strength of schedule, but for the most part, they've got solid resumes, they've got solid efficiency, and they've got solid wins. So it all kind of comes together.
All right, unrelated to the top 16, throwing you a wild card. Kansas State, how far out are they at this point, or do you actually have them in?
I think Kansas State's one of the first four out at this point. I think they're really knocking on the door when you get those quality wins, not just Arizona and Kansas at home, but the whooping they put on Iowa State names. If that was a 2 or a 3 point win, it would be one of the best wins in the country. The fact that they won by 19, you can't forget a performance like that. And I think the committee has always shown you can have some bad if you do some really outstanding stuff mixed in with it. And I think Kansas State could be that team.
Yeah, that quickly went from like the weirdest result of the season, like right up there with Ohio State stomping Kentucky, to a oh shit, they're here now type of moment. Yeah, I mean we can pull up their remaining schedule real quick. I don't even know where they're at resume metrics wise, but where is Kansas State? I'm gonna have to do a search here. Shikes. Kansas State, 57. There they are, which is exactly right. Rutgers 2022. At BYU, at Utah, definitely at BYU is quad 1A. Is Utah top 75? They're close. Arizona State, UCF. So there's aside from that home game against Iowa State, who, as we mentioned, they already beat the hell out of. There's not a game on there they're likely to lose, right? If they're anywhere near as good as they've been for the last 6 games, they could run the table. They could go from 7-11 to whatever that would be, 19-11, 20-11. Hell, they might win the Big 12 tournament. It would be the craziest story of all time. But we'll uh we'll talk more Kansas State next time. After that game at BYU, I think we'll have a better feel about them. But until tomorrow night, I got to get my Guinness and we will have fun discussing that and we'll record sometime, probably Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. We'll figure it out. Till next time, take care.